Welcome to Caring.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Caring Well. Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well, a Middleton Pediatrics podcast where we have conversations to help you care well for your child. Today we talk to Dr. David Goodman. He's a local physician and he shares about his journey as a father, what he's learned, and what he's put together to help other fathers care well for their child. So let's go to that conversation. All right, David Goodman.
Hey, how's it
welcome
going?
to Caring Well. Appreciate
Thanks.
you being here.
Happy to be here.
So we're going to have a fun conversation primarily about fathers and sons.
Yeah.
But before we get into any of that, I would love for you to share a little bit about your stage of life,
Sure.
kind of a personal stage of life, and then also professionally, how you spend your days, your journey to where you are now professionally.
Personally, I went over the hill 2 years ago.
Nice.
And,
Which hill is that?
Turning 40.
Okay.
Turning 40.
There's more hills, by the way.
Yes,
So yeah.
I am kind of like right in that like sweet spot of midlife. We've been here in Orlando for 8 years. I've been working professionally as a teaching physician at Winnie Palmer Hospital. I work with the residents and function as a hospitalist there and take care of the moms and babies that come to Winnie. And I've loved getting to do that. In kind of our personal life, we have 3 kids. I have 3 boys, 10, 8, and 5. We love living life here in Orlando. And I've loved getting to know you and being part of the Middleton Pediatrics family.
We appreciate that. And should say your wife's pediatric nurse practitioner.
Yes.
I feel like a lot of your perspective, which I know we'll get into, it really is so professional healthcare laden, right? I mean,
Yes,
you're
for sure,
OBGYN, she's pediatrics, I would say to most, the field's most sort of about embarking well.
For sure.
So I'm sure that's shaped a lot. So specifically, your teaching faculty at Winnie,
Yep.
Orlando Health, OBGYN. You've also done stuff, though, that's outside of that with public health and some other things.
Yes. Right after residency, my wife and I moved to Tanzania, and I was technically like a Fulbright scholar there working with Duke. And we spent a year living and working at a teaching hospital in Tanzania near Mount Kilimanjaro. So it's called Kilimanjaro Christian Medical Center. And that was a year that really shaped our life, shaped our marriage. It was a great time after residency to get to know each other again after working 80-hour work weeks. It's interesting, when I was kind of writing a fundraising letter, as we were leaving, I wrote, the last 10 years of life, like medical training and stuff, have prepared us for that year. Included the phrase, but I think that this year is going to prepare us for the next 10 years of our life. And I thought that was going to be continuing to work in Africa, continuing to work in a teaching standpoint. But really that year taught us so much and actually brought us back here to Orlando. And, since then I've continued to be involved in global health for a long time, traveling multiple trips and serving on various boards and committees and that sort of thing. But really it was that propensity to teaching and developing that we thought was going to be kind of a lifelong calling to residents and African trainees really has kind of taken root here in Orlando and things that we've done through church. Currently, the last couple of years, I've been focusing on what they would call executive coaching, but I kind of call it personal development and coaching people, not telling them what to do, but helping men in particular gain awareness on what they really want to do and how to do it.
But not
more
necessarily
effectively.
medical field, just more general than that.
Not medical field. There are some people who focus on that entirely, but I really wanted to focus on working with men, which is odd because I'm an OBGYN. So I gave the first half of my career to be focused on maternal mortality and helping moms not die in labor, which is a huge problem around the world. But what I found is that a lot of men were dying on the inside. And so now I try to give myself to what I call paternal mortality. And helping to correct that and heal that for the men in Orlando and a little bit broader audience.
You have what you feel like are unique perspectives on healthcare here based on what you've seen elsewhere?
Yeah, I think healthcare in America is certainly a complicated thing to optimize. And I think I almost switched to pediatrics when I was in training, very close to the end. Bethany and I dreamed of maybe owning our own practice together, kind of doing what you do. And I think I wanted to do that because I see how important the early years are in the way that our habits affect our health for the rest of our life. Actually, one of the reasons we left Africa is that what I found there working at teaching hospital was that there were a lot of amazing people who were capable of caring for their own population. And so now we actually donate a sacrificial amount of money to help train them. And we continue to make that a huge priority for our family. But I recognized that they were able to take care of their own people, living closer to their families and speaking the language and doing these sort of things. And that we had areas to focus on here. And a lot of that is involved in helping families make healthy starts from the beginning so that healthcare down the road is not as complicated.
Any glaring gaps in your field of medicine here that you would love to magic wand change?
There's an interesting thing when it comes to having babies that I often say, when a woman's in labor, there's only one person in the room who's in charge, and that is not me. And unfortunately, it's not her either. It's the baby. And so I think if there was a magic wand that I could change, it would be to improve our relationship as obstetricians with the baby in utero. Because most C-sections sometimes feel like it was a lost opportunity for the mom to really have the vaginal delivery that she wanted. And so I think that if I could have a magic wand, I would help us to really know who were that 10% of kids that ultimately need a C-section and could come out operatively, and we can let the other moms really have the vaginal delivery they really.
Well, I mean, ballpark, what are national rates of C-sections in the United States?
Oh man, between 30 to 40%, depending on the hospital.
All right.
And
as complicated as the answer that you just alluded to is, everyone would say it should be lower.
Yes, everyone would say it should be lower. Certainly in other countries, it's lower, where women are forced to labor and don't have the opportunity for C-sections. They are lower. One thing that's interesting in my research in Africa that we found is that, most kids here, there's an acidosis rate when you're in labor, like stress in utero, like where your blood is, turning acidotic, kind of like that burning you feel when you run really hard. That happens about 1% of the time here in the US. It was 10% of babies in Africa. And so what we do to intervene early is to really prevent that fetal stress in utero that I think a lot of other countries just tolerate. And so it makes things more complicated for us.
All right, well, let's talk more about maybe I was going to say more recent passion project, but maybe it's not recent. Actually, it sounds like there's been seeds of it for a long time, but kind of how why we're here tonight, why we're talking, and it's your heart for helping equip fathers and their sons. Is that a pretty fair description?
Totally.
Okay.
That's very fair. And so a lot of that grew out of my own lack. I thought I was going to nail being a father, honestly. Like I thought
you probably nailed pretty much everything else. I mean, academically,
right?
Yeah.
I crushed a lot of things in life, but becoming a father really crushed me in a lot of ways. And so growing up in the 90s, I don't think we ever anticipated there were going to be books. They were entitled The Boyhood Crisis, The Problem with Boys, Boys Adrift. When I had 3 boys, it felt like a real calling on my life of, wow, I have 3 boys to steward into manhood. And, sheepishly, I kind of wish I had some girls because my wife is an amazing woman and she was so capable of raising really competent young women. But when I was given 3 boys, it became a real calling on my life.
That somehow led to what you've done. So maybe one thing we should do is let's introduce at least what you've done. And then I'm going to go back and ask a little bit of how it came about. And then we'll circle back at the end to talk more specifically about the program. But yeah, tell what you've done of late.
Talk to a lot of my friends and talk to the men that I coach and the men that I work with. I could see that there is a crisis of formation. And
you mean really of men, not just of
men, yeah, for sure. So
yeah.
that the reason boys are struggling today is because men in the previous 1 or 2 generations have kind of struggled silently. And now we're learning more about it and more open with it. And so, a lot of this grew out of my own journey to need to really raise my own sons. And so I often tell my boys that I would wrestle an alligator for them. Like we live here in Florida, we're around gators. Hopefully we're around water that probably has gators in it a lot. And, one day when I was kind of struggling as a dad with anger and getting annoyed and being impatient with them, it dawned on me that I say that I would wrestle an alligator for my boys, but have I really wrestled myself and gone on that journey that I needed to be the dad I needed to be? And so for me, that led to the same thing doctors always do. They read a lot and study. And so I just dove into the literature and the books on what does it mean to be a boy these days. And so I created this library and started talking to guys around me, and they were like, hey, how can I do what you're doing? And how can I raise my sons kind of with intention and be able to do this? And so last year I worked on creating a course, and I created a short course. I say that it's kind of 90 hours of reading compressed into 90 minutes. And so it's called Basecamp 322.
Give us the high level overview. What is Basecamp 322?
Basecamp 322 is a formational journey for fathers and sons. I often say that I try to help dads who are crushing it at work keep from crushing their kids. And I think so many dads can get focused on, their growth as an executive and a worker, a leader, that sort of thing. But they don't really focus on what skills do I need to gain to be a better dad. So this is a distillation and kind of quick dose that dads can get to gain confidence that they're really investing their life the way it's going to matter for their son.
What does that look like in a tangible format?
The Basecamp 322 is a course you can do asynchronously on your own time. It's less time than it takes to watch a football game. And so it's about 90 minutes of content broken up into 14 sections. There's 3 stages. The course comes along with a field guide, which is a discussion guide that has the point, the principles, and the process, what helps you kind of have like the key point you want to take away, some of the teaching points, and then chance for you to kind of reflect and process. And then every stage has some discussion questions that you can do with your bride, your bros, and your boy. So it's just quick conversation starters that you can do and work through the material together in a formative way with these kind of 3 important relationships. What it does is it evokes this idea of mountaineering and camping with your son. So whenever we lived near Kilimanjaro, I climbed the mountain, summited it. Everybody thinks about, the apex, these sunrise views and the vistas on top of Kilimanjaro, the roof of Africa. And that's great. But you spend your whole week of climbing Kilimanjaro just getting to base camp. And so if adolescence is really that climb from 13 to 18, the summit climb that boys have to go through, well, the ages 2 to 12 are that base camp experience where you're getting ready as a family and preparing them for the journey they're going to face. The number 322 comes from Luke 322, when it's at Jesus' baptism. And in the biblical story, God tells Jesus before he's done anything good and miraculous or impressive, you are my beloved son, and with you I'm well pleased. And I'm convinced that if we can have our sons arrive at base camp at that 12 to 13-year-old range with that idea securely embedded within them, then those boys are going to be hard to stop on their journey to the top.
Just for clarification, a lot of what your emphasis is the pre-13-year-old training formation.
Yes, there's a lot of resources out there, particularly focused on adolescent boys and the idea of like male initiation and some of that sort of stuff. But first of all, that's the journey I'm living right now. I could have 10, 8, and 5. And so I needed to get that early part figured out. And I think sometimes dads have a hard time knowing what to do with boys and just kids in general, like these little humans that just disrupt your life and change everything.
And maybe especially in the early years,
yeah,
right?
Exactly,
I mean,
yes.
It gets progressively more, as it gets a little more peer related,
Yes.
It maybe becomes a little more intuitive, but
for sure,
you're right.
For sure. And so I think that when you have these young boys, one thing I experienced myself and had to learn is you can be too quick to kind of do some of those like masculine things, like to watch a Rocky movie with them, or to even expect them to be tough. Like a 5-year-old can't really just like suck it up and be a man because he's not a man. And so I think that I had to learn a lot about what do boys really need in this time in order to thrive and become the people that they're going to be.
All right. So one of the things you said, which I know is part of your base camp journey, is sort of starting with not even what's going on with them, but what's going on with yourself.
For sure.
So maybe share a little bit more about that.
In Basecamp 322, we have 3 stages. And the first is Stalk the Beast.
Stalk the Beast.
Yes.
Okay.
So the second is Set Up Camp. And the third is Stoke the Fire.
Okay.
But Stalk the Beast really comes from the idea of the gator story of like, if I would wrestle an alligator for my kids, what inside of me really needs to be wrestled that keeps coming out sideways and is going to harm them?
Maybe just share a little bit about why that's so important.
So it was Father Ronald Rolheiser who said, what we don't transform, we transmit to our kids. And for so much of us as fathers, we have things inside of us that historically we've just passed them down from generation to generation. My grandfather was this way, my father was this way. But in Stalking the Beast, we have the opportunity to say, I am not going to transmit my past wounds to my children.
These things that we don't address don't just go away.
They don't just go away.
Okay, that's great.
And we don't have to accept this is just the way I am.
Right.
Just because that was the way your dad was. They can be transformed.
If it doesn't get addressed, it'll come out
Yes.
later in less healthy ways and be transferred in unhealthy ways to your kid. And they're going to have to either deal with it or just keep transferring it later. Huh.
You know, elements of my shadow side that I'm hiding with anger and bravado and kind of refusing to look at, then that's going to get transferred to my sons. And so Stalking the Beast just begins with naming some of your childhood experience, some of the false narratives that are in your head, things that you expect what a man should and kind of must look like. And then you kind of name that in the company of other men. And once you name it, then the beast doesn't go away, but you can mount it on your wall and it can be neutralized of its influence on your life.
That does feel like not an easy step. And so
Not
I'm
easy
sure
at all.
you've got tools and ways to guide people through that. Are there high level things that you think can help someone take that introspective journey?
You know, some of it begins with just learning to tell your story and doing this kind of in the company of other men, you know, starting off safe with your wife. And, you know, sometimes one of the things we do is just, can you develop 3 words that summarize your childhood? If you can get clarity on that and then be able to communicate that to people. One of the psychologists that I work with on his coaching team, I've summarized his work in saying you can start to think your feelings and feel your thoughts. And so when you tell your story and start to piece together some of these things that are kind of brewing inside of you, you have strong feelings that are just inherent and innate, kind of quick responses to different things. And you can start to think about them. And you, when you express them, you move them from kind of like your right brain to your left brain and are able to analyze them a little bit more. But then you're also able to kind of feel your thoughts. And so if you have a thought that's in your mind that can be a limiting belief or a constraining element that needs to be confronted, you can actually start to feel it and sense, where did that come from when I was a kid? And what is the message that I'm living out that I need to change?
Yeah, I mean, I think both personally and here in the office, you do see stuff that's deep within us. It keeps rearing its head. And so, I mean, not as eloquently, but this phrase I keep thinking, deal with your stuff, you know,
Totally.
deal with it.
Yeah.
Dan Allender, to be told, was that one of the things you came across?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like that's probably for me the best tool I've ever come across, that trying to look at my life as a story, identify themes, read it like you read a work of fiction, and then you can kind of see where the story's going and whatever and stuff like that. So, all right, so that's Stalk the Beast.
Stalk the Beast, yeah.
Okay. It sounds like you're saying that's sort of a little bit of an essentially placed as the first step.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think until you do that, it's, if you keep going with the camping analogy, there's a beast lurking in the forest. And anything that you try to do will be foiled, because I tried this. You know, my wife and I are fairly organized and people, and we were trying to set up a lot of family like rhythms. And I found that there was still a functional weakness inside of me that hadn't been dealt with, that just needed to be dealt with. Because otherwise I was performing,
right,
and I was living up to her expectations rather than actually becoming a loving person and letting that really change me from the inside. Because it's then after we stalk the beast that you can then set up camp.
Okay.
And so set up camp is kind of our take on like Justin Early's Habits of the Household. So my wife and I, we teach through this at our church in a parenting course and work on parents with this, but it's simply just 4 M's. And so it's a mission, the messages, moments, and milestones that are going to shape your family. We believe that like a good organization, family should have a mission statement. And, you know, some people want to do that, some don't, but establishing the mission of your family and what's like the clear set of ideas that you want to be working towards, we think is really important. And there's some tools to help you kind of build that. You know, in medical school, we have this thing called the hidden curriculum. Like, of course you learn like anatomy and physiology, but there's also, you learn like, yes, you're already laughing. You learn like how to avoid the surgeons throwing the tools across the room and for the residents not to bless you out. And so there's a lot of things that you learn They're just expected. And every family has those things too. There's hidden messages that even if you say, we love you no matter what, but you act very unloving to certain behaviors, that is a message that's being communicated. So we invite families to just consider what the messages are in their home. And then moments are both kind of the habits and the highlights. What are the habits that are shaping you every day? What are the highlights that just really mark your life? And then milestones are these things that different mile markers along the journey that your kids can use to know they're on the right path. And so we have one particularly in our family at 8 years old that we use as kind of that pre-adolescent milestone to help the boys know what's coming.
You mentioned one of the M's being mission. You said every family needs or should have a mission statement. Can you share yours?
Yeah. My wife and I are both in the healthcare field. So health was a really important thing to us. So I have it printed out. I gave it to my wife when she gave birth to our first kid. And it's, we exist to nurture the spiritual, emotional, and physical health of everyone in our sphere of influence. And so that mission statement really is what led us to move to Tanzania, and it led us to come back. And it shapes everything we do, including producing an online course like this to help parents.
So obviously a lot of intentionality there, but one of the really, I think, interesting things is where we're going is talking about fathers and sons, but steps 1 and 2 have not even
Totally
with the son, right? It's kind of deal with your own stuff and then have some thoughtfulness about the rhythms of your family, because that's the current your child is swimming in, regardless of what you do one-on-one with them. And so being intentional about your own work, being intentional about how you want daily family rhythm to be. And then the last one.
The last phase is stoke the fire.
Okay.
And this is really just trying to help parents, dads in particular, be convinced that what
you
matters.
say dads in particular, I know I interrupted you, but really the first things are equally applicable to any parent.
And really couples are working on these together.
Yeah.
It's nice when the dad can hear it first. And so he doesn't feel like he's kind of like falling behind. It's delivered in messaging to the dad first, so he can come alongside the mom and work on it together. But then stoke the fire is helping families realize that securing attachment is the primary objective for that pre-adolescent phase, not academics and not athletics, but that securing attachment and helping is actually the thing that's going to, when I had little kids, I thought that if I was too comforting, too loving, that I would make my kids cupcakes. Soft.
Yeah.
Yes. What I have learned in this journey is that it's actually the boys who are not loved very well that become soft and apathetic. And that what secure attachment does is it gives boys in particular, but every kid, this secure base from which they can go out and explore the world. And so that when kids are properly loved, they have the courage that it takes to take risk and then come back and be comforted. And that getting that balance of comfort and challenge correct will change the course of your child's life.
Any quick pearls on how to find that balance?
I think whenever you have the opportunity, choose love. I think John Townsend, who I trained with, often says that connection is usually the right answer because it always helps. And sometimes it's all you needed. I'll give you an example. So just this weekend, my son's 10 years old. We were doing childcare at church, like working with the 8-year-olds in their class. And he was with me like all day. Doing that at church. We went to a picnic. He was sitting beside me. We had a couple over for dinner. He was sticking around and like listening to the adult conversation, not being a kid.
First kid. Yeah.
First kid. Yeah, totally. There's part of me that years ago would have been like, gosh, my kid's been around me all day. This is like so annoying. I wish he would just like stop asking so many questions. But Monday morning I was reflecting on this and how I was with Deacon all day. And so Monday morning, I took the step to be like, you know what, buddy? I loved being with you yesterday. You did a really good job respecting adult conversation. You demonstrated a lot of responsibility in kids class, and I loved having you there with me. That cost me nothing. That isn't something a lot of dads would do and just without prompting. But I think what I was able to do for him really changed the course of that experience for him. And so I think when it comes to attachment and securing this thing, taking that one little step to speak words of love are going to change the way that he approaches the next time that we're serving somewhere or doing something maybe outside of his comfort zone together.
One of the things that comes to mind as you're sharing this, that again, feeling my own experience and then so many of the families that we see here is what everything you said requires time, intentionality, which usually doesn't happen if you're just sort of getting through day. Are there ways you guys have specifically created more margin in your family to have time for that which is most important?
Yeah, but I would push back on that a little bit.
Okay.
In that, one thing I say that in Base Camp 322, we don't try to add activities to your life. We try to help you do everything in your life differently. And a great example is that, one of my sons would get really emotional about homework. And I think some of that is that he was functioning from a deficit of belief. So we would have hours of homework, emotional breakdowns, which of course threatened my sensibilities as like an academic professional dad. And so that took a lot of time. But I think as we've learned to help him with his attachment and his confidence and those sort of things, it's actually saved us tons of hours. But when it comes down to like, okay, what do you invest? Like, what are intentional things? One simple thing that we do at our house, it's called Power Hour. And so it's just Sunday mornings. My wife gets some peace and quiet. She goes for a walk and has like an hour by herself. And I just play a game with each one of the boys. So 20 minutes of just pick whatever you want. Thank God it's board games. Used to it was like imagination, and that was hard. But now we play board games and we compete, and they get face-to-face time. They all want to try to beat dad. My 10-year-old smoked me at Stratego the other day, and he felt so good about it. And I got him back. But Power Hour and what those 60 minutes do, because the other caveat is you have to play peacefully with your brother. So the other two play peacefully while one brother gets one-on-one. So you're training them to work it out. Because if you aren't peaceful with your brother, you lose your chance. And then if everybody gets done and gets ready for church, then you get to watch football highlights. They have all sorts of incentive to make Power Hour work, but they love it and fight for the chance to get it done.
When, if ever, does the father allow the kid to win and maybe artificially level a playing field, or is that making him soft? What's your expert opinion on that?
Yes, my wife and I often disagree about this a little bit. I think there are times when you have to read the room and like read what's going on with your kid. I think that there's certainly times in playing some littler board games where I would give my kids an advantage to start off with, and then just play and see what happens. There's definitely times when we're really into Clue right now, and so sometimes I'll kind of hold back for like one or two turns if I think I know the answer, and just let my kid try to get the final accusation. But honestly, man, right now, even with my 5-year-old, if you're not on top of your game, like you're going to lose at Clue. So, I mentioned my 10-year-old smoked me in Stratego the other day. They're always wanting to really earn that victory over dad. So I don't hold back too much.
I think it's hard because I do feel like we hear these stories, Tiger Woods stories or whatever, and it feels like for every one kid that faces this unrelenting adversity and just rises up to it, I wonder how many get discouraged and feel the need to quit. So it's a tough one to know how to answer.
It's an innate personality thing. Like we started playing cornhole. I got a rope that goes between the two things, and there's a knot in the rope marked for every kid where they can throw. So all of them have a handicap, and I throw from the regulation length, and we have a really competitive, fun time. And it's a lot of fun.
That's a great way to do it. It's
really easy.
Extrapolate that to other things. Yeah. If someone was listening to this and felt like this sounds awesome and I probably am not going to be able to pull this off, how would you respond to that? If it perhaps feels daunting?
This has been years for me of learning and progressing. It takes the first step to do this. And some of that is just starting to ask those questions, whether as a couple or as a parent, of like, asking your spouse, like, when do you see me like not really being the best version of myself? And accepting the answer, not reacting too much, but really kind of taking that to heart and processing it. And so I think the more that you can do to value being a loving person, I think ultimately the better person you'll become, the more fulfilling relationship you'll have, and ultimately it'll pay dividends for your kids. And so we talk about our investments and and how compounding interest changes things. I think that these small investments that we make in our kids, just little things like different comments here, controlling your messaging, having a few little fun things, they pay dividends and continue to pay off for families down the road.
You're speaking to something that's a little feels present in everything you're saying that I don't want to go over too quickly. It's almost, you probably would have a better word, but almost the process of auditing. The first thing, even stalking the beast, is a little bit of auditing one's own past, really, and deep psyche, right? I mean, that's some deep auditing work. And then what you just said there, inviting an external auditor, my spouse, perhaps,
Totally,
or other people. And so there's a decent amount of sort of evaluating and then reiterating. And I hear what you're saying about time, but that does take at least, maybe it's not extra time, but it takes a slowness about life to do that kind of thing that isn't the way our cultural current flows.
Correct.
So it probably does require some degree of going against current.
You're exactly right. And so that's one of the early messages in Basecamp 322. John Eldredge, kind of fatherhood, manhood author, he says, most men are going to want to take the pass and not do this. But he warns fathers, you can't take the pass. You have to slow down and do this. And not everybody wants to do that. I learned that I needed to. And I hope I can stand back, 6 or 7 years later from doing this and be a witness that slowing down can actually help you move forward.
A number of our listeners will obviously be moms, and then also word for single parents.
Yeah, for sure.
Any thoughts come to mind as far as, and no one's asking you to have some solution that's true for everyone, right?
Yeah,
you're just trying
for
to pass along what you've learned. But what would be some words of encouragement to both moms for themselves, but maybe also for encouragements for their husbands, and then also for any single parents?
Let me start with single parents first. I think that there certainly are a lot of challenges that they're going to face, and also uniquenesses too. I mean, they're going to have only one person who can possibly mess up in their family. They don't have another parent to conflict with, but they have the opportunity to really establish that secure kind of deep connection. But they may need to be intentional about where can I bring things in, given my particular skill sets as a parent. What deficits is my son or daughter going to have that I need to reach out to? And I think part of that as the community here in Orlando is being available to walk alongside people like that. One of the greatest things my dad ever did when I was a kid is my best friend's dad died when we were in second grade. And I think what he did to really take him under his wing too, and include him in a lot of these early childhood moments until his mom got remarried was really remarkable. And so I think that sometimes those opportunities are there if we make ourselves available to community that can be part of it. I want to encourage moms that I know that motherhood is really tough. One of the best books that my wife and I read this year was called A Better Share by Morgan Cutlip. And it's all about the mental load that moms carry. And that book was wonderful. It's a book written by a woman, primarily about problems that women deal with, but it's so including and friendly to men. And so I think that for wives, what we're really trying to do in Basecamp 322 is help you and your husband get on the same page. And it's creating little discussion guides that neutralize the conversation and make it non-confrontational around this content to help you, live with less of that mental load and to be able to work things out and know, are we doing the right things, and are the things we're doing really helping our kids become who we want them to be? A
lot of your journey still to go, but you are over halfway done with some of, which is kind of a sobering thought. Anything that if you could tell your younger father self that now, what would that be?
I think the first thing would be that the emotional breakdowns that you see in toddlers are totally normal developmentally. And it's not some weakness in your kid. It's not really something that needs to be corrected. It's just something that needs to be often redirected. And I did not understand that as a father and reacted too strongly to what was really just normal development.
Yeah, certainly if you have some false view of it's going to be a certain way and then it's a very different way, that can be a pretty distressing thing that you feel like either needs to be fixed or you feel like a failure or whatever. And you're just normalizing that. Maybe give what is in the spirit of one small step,
Yeah, sure.
what would be one small thing that if someone listening didn't take anything else, but like this is something you could implement that would be game changing in some way, what would you say to that?
If you're a Seinfeld fan, there was this classic episode where George realized everything he'd ever done in his life was wrong. So he was going to start doing the opposite. So in so many dads that I talk with, I just tell them, why don't you just try the opposite of what you would normally do? And so a lot of times bedtime is like chaotic for families, and they're wrestling and there's yelling and there's all these threats. And if you don't get to bed, I'm going to hang you upside down by your toes. I had one dad who, instead of fighting with his kid for 15 minutes, he would just go lay in the kid's bed for 5 minutes and just wait patiently. And that kid would finish up what he was doing and naturally want to come lay in bed with his kid. And so sometimes you have to just diffuse the situation and just do the opposite and see what happens.
Good. Any almost one word answers that come to mind if someone said, what are the consistent qualities you see in great dads?
I think a great dad is humble enough to know that he doesn't have it all together, but courageous enough to try. And, we never reach perfection, but I think we can be really surprised what a few years of working towards personal growth can become.
Where can people find out more about you and this work that you've put together?
This lives online at basecamp322.com. My email is available at david@basecamp322. And we started gathering. We have 2 groups here in Orlando that are meeting. I'd love to help organize more and facilitate some. And we have a few groups kind of in other states that are getting formed right now, groups of guys that are doing this together. So I would love to have guys here in Orlando in particular reach out, learn to walk alongside them, however they need.
That's great. Any final words of encouragement to parents that you would love for them to hear?
I want parents to know that it is never too late. Even if you haven't gotten started, even if you feel like you're behind, that
even outside of 2 to 12, I mean,
totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I think our kids, no matter whether they're 3 or 30, are programmed to want to love us. And so, psychologists used to believe that attachment, like if you didn't get it before you were 4, you were just out of luck. But modern research has shown that attachment patterns really can be healed and they can be reformed. It's never too late to make the effort to foster that secure attachment with your kids, and it'll change both of you in the process.
Along that line, because I think there might be the need of repair might be far greater or will be far greater in some situations than others. And certainly if things are later. Any words you would say about the power of repair in this arena?
Oh man. It's this whole idea of rupture and repair is how we grow as athletes in the weight room, is that our muscles grow through that process of rupturing the fibers and growing back stronger. And psychology shows that our brains work the same way, is that you only have to get it right, 51% of the time as a parent. And that it's actually more loving for your kid to experience you mess up, model forgiveness and repentance, let them practice forgiveness. And in doing that, it wires their brains and secures and strengthens the tracks in them. And so there's nothing that repair can't make better.
What an encouraging word, that it's not the screw ups we do as parents, it's the lack of repair.
Totally.
That would be much more detrimental.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that,
for sure.
That's good. Well, I appreciate you sharing with us, and even more appreciate what you're doing. The whole spirit of what we try to do in these conversations is the title of Caring Well, to find those that are trying to care well for kids and that care about kids, and then that can help parents care well for their kids. And that is sort of our heartbeat. And I appreciate it being yours too, and sharing with us.
Yeah. We would love to see Orlando be a great place to be a parent.
Good deal. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.